So all of these four, we call them our biological molecules. They tend to be large, okay, so you may see the term macromolecule associated with them. Like I said earlier, the body wants to get and use materials by getting sugars first, lipids second, proteins last. When we look at sugars, the carbohydrates, we tend to say the sugars are simple or the sugars are complex. The simplest sugar that the body can use is glucose. This is a monosaccharide because it is simply one ring. If you look at glucose, the formula for glucose, C6H12O6. That tells me, based on chemistry, it has a structure like this. And each corner is a carbon ring, is a carbon. And therefore, it is a 6-carbon sugar. Does that make sense? Because it is my simplest sugar, it's the sugar the body can use first. Y'all probably hearing something called the afternoon slump, where if you're working and it gets to be the afternoon, and because you've already been at work all morning, and you've had your, your lunch break, and you have to come back from lunch break, and you're just like, I just don't think I can make it till 5 o'clock. I don't think I can do it. So you start getting all tired, and you're just like, oh, let me go to the vending machine and get a candy bar. That'll make me feel better. Chocolate always helps. Anybody ever had that problem? I know. Yeah. Me, it's the fried dough. I want to see, like, the honey buns or the cookies or something like that. Yeah, that always helps too. But we take it, we eat it, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, I can make it till 5 o'clock. Okay, 5 o'clock gets here. And then you're like, yes, what has happened? Because that food stuff you took in contained glucoses, which is the simplest sugar the body can use. That glucose made it easily into the cell, into my mitochondrion, and I made ATP. And then I used them. Does that make sense? Now, let's say, rather than going to the vending machine, well, I've learned that, because you know how, like, here at the downtown campus, I don't know if any of y'all have been here before, we used to have like a little food area where they had like hamburgers and fries and stuff like that, and now we've got like those little vending machines and everything. And they're trying to put, healthier food into them. I learned on Thursday, I think, of last week, they're going to be like even putting in salads, and they're going to be fresh salads. In other words, it's not going to be the salad like you go buy at like a store and it'll last for like 7 or 10 days or something. They're kind of like preserved. I think the guy said they used nitrogen or something to preserve those salads. I went, what? I said, no, don't tell me that. And he said, yeah, our salads are going to actually be fresh. They'll only be in the machine for 2 days at a time, because they're not going to have any of that nitrogen preservative in it. And he said they're going to actually be, I was like, oh, dude, you made my day, you know, because sometimes I just don't have time to get my lunch ready, you know, and everything in the morning. And so let's say I had gone to the vending machine and I chose something else. Let's say I chose fruit, because I think they're going to have fruit down there too. I chose fruit. Fruit has fructose in it, which is another simple sugar, but guess what? The body has to arrange it to the 6th carbon to be used. So it takes a little bit longer, but you get energy, and it's a little more efficient. Not great, okay, but it's a little more efficient. Now, we can get into something like galactose, which might come from like seeds and nuts, all right, which in some cases, some people choose that as their source in the afternoon. So there are some other sources you can have that would be a little bit of a healthier choice, and a little, you know, longer acting, and may not give you that crash like the glucose does. Because when I say the glucose is quick, the glucose is quick, okay, a very quick source.
On the homework, we had to like identify like glucose, fructose, lactose, sucrose, and like maltose and structures.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be something we're going to need to memorize?
Well, when we look at, for example, sucrose, which is my favorite, okay, this one is table sugar, okay, this one is 2 carbon rings together. So you're looking at there being a bond and going to another glucose ring. Now, what does that mean? That means the body now needs an enzyme. If it's sucrose, I would need that little protein to be sucrase, so that this sucrose molecule could fit into it. I could break the bond between the carbon rings, and now I've got 2 glucoses. And the body would use that. And whatever it doesn't use, it'll store. Did that make sense? Why we need to kind of be familiar with whether it's just a single ring, a double ring, or the one that's going to come up next, which is poly.
Yeah, no, I was just seeing like
if you actually needed to know if it was 5 carbon, 6 carbon.
Those structures needed to be memorized. Like, are we going to unit test this over like structures, like quite in depth?
I would want you to know that for the simple sugar, it's just a carbon ring.
Right.
If it's a disaccharide, we know that we've got the 2 molecules together. That's it.
Right.
Poly, 2 or more, was more than 2.
Okay.
Okay? Now that becomes important because, like, for example, lactose that we mentioned earlier, that's a disaccharide. So it's 2 of those carbon rings together, but if you don't have lactase, it's not there to break it down. Maltose, that's just an example of the sugar that's found in beer, because that's what comes in hops, okay? But it's a disaccharide. The polysaccharides, long chains of monos, mostly a long chain of glucose. So it would simply be glucose after glucose after glucose. And they have a bond between each one of them. starches. We've all heard of starches, right? Because they're like, ooh, when the doctor says, ooh, you got to cut back on carbs. All the good stuff. Okay? Basically, the doctor's saying, don't eat those cookies. Don't eat those honey buns. Eat your fruit. Eat some yogurt. Okay? And don't eat none of that pasta. Don't eat none of that bread. You know, don't you love it when the doctor tells you that? Yeah. Wait till you get to be my age. Okay? Every time you go, cut out those carbs. So, starch, yay. Okay? This other one, glycogen. Don't forget it. We're going to learn what that is, okay? It is simply a short-term storage of a glucose molecule, but we'll get deeper into that when we start talking about muscle cells, for example. Cellulose, it's what makes up the plant cell wall, meaning we can eat plants, right? All right, anybody in here simply a vegetarian or anything? Okay, so we either eat a plant directly or we eat something that ate a plant. Okay, so cellulose makes up the plant cell wall. As a human, if we eat it directly, we can't break it down. It's our fiber. Something else doctors tell you to increase. But starch. With starches that are these long, and when I say long, they can be long chains of glucose molecules. So what the body has to do, we take them in, and the body has to break that bond, break, break, so that I now have individual glucose molecules that can go into and be used for making ATP. So what I'm trying to point out right here, whether you take in the disaccharide, well, anything other than glucose, if you take in the other sugars, the other simple sugars, the disaccharide, the polysaccharide, the body has to break it down into its component part, that glucose molecule, for it to be used by the cell. If you take in too much and you don't use it all as an energy source, it does get stored, with eventual long-term storage being in the fat cells. So our carbs are the easiest source of energy, so to speak. Cells will definitely use that quickly. Now the next biological molecule, the lipids. Now, we take in lipids. As we take them in based on their structure, which is a triglyceride. Tri means 3. But everything in my body is based on 2 fatty tails. Okay? If I look at a membrane, like the membrane of the cell, membrane of organelles in the cell, they are 2 lipid tails. What I ingest has